Hi everyone, I'm Tomas Hult. I'm a professor in the Broad College of Business at Michigan State University. And for this year's economic forecast, I figured I would talk about global efficiency, specifically in terms of explaining today's international trade environment, and then have some connections to what we do in Michigan, of course. So we're one of 50 states, and oftentimes we look at where we're ranked relative to all the other states, especially in our case then related to international trade, international business topics. So if we broadly look at that, we can look at world trade, world production, world population, and regional trade agreements for the last 60 years actually. Data is from 1960 to 2020 forecasted the last 3 years. And we've seen a tremendous increase, almost exponential increase in world trade, with the minor wrinkle in the dip there in 2008 and 9. World production has also gone up. The red part of this chart, or the line that is red. World population is the steady state brown curve, and then regional trade agreements is in blue. If we talk about trade agreements specifically, we see an uncanny, almost one-to-one correlation between the green and the blue parts of the chart. Those two lines almost go one-to-one throughout those 60 years that we're covering on the chart. And that's interesting because, regional trade agreements, there are about 300 in the world. The United States is part of 14 overall trade agreements, bilateral and regional trade agreements. For Michigan, those trade agreements are tremendously important. 68% of Michigan exports, $40.7 billion in 2017, the latest year we have data, come from those regional trade agreements, or countries and companies within those regional trade agreements. That's an increase of 9.3% from 2016 to 2017, the last year we can compare. So there's a tremendous importance of trade agreement for Michigan, and I think the country at large. Oftentimes we talk about those trade agreements as perhaps not being negotiated well or could be renegotiated, but for Michigan they clearly have a powerful effect. Michigan's export has held steady from 2017 to 2018, number 6 in the country, so that's pretty good out of 50 states. We have dropped in foreign direct investment, meaning foreign country bodies, organizations, mostly companies, of course, from foreign countries that invest in the state of Michigan. We're number 4 in 2017, but dropped to 13 in 2018. So that could be a diminishing set of resources for us to do business in Michigan, which could come to haunt us later on if we don't create the infrastructure and development that we need to be competitive in the marketplace, in the global marketplace. We talk about customers' wants and needs as well. We still see tremendous overpowering of differences around the world, as opposed to the similarities that we're building in the globalized, more homogeneous world. But there's still large differences across the 195 countries, and we need to take that into account when we produce Michigan products and sell them overseas. 271,337 jobs are supported in Michigan by exports, but 49% of all the exports, 29.2 billion, is attributed or allocated from transportation exports, and that's kind of a given as a traditional auto state. Even today, we are an auto state in that sense. Almost half of our exports come from transportation sector. And then we can summarize that as we're ranked 6 out of 50 in exporting among all the 50 states, which is great. We are ranked 3rd in terms of importing. Unfortunately, the trade balance that results in makes us 49th out of 50. So we have a tremendous imbalance where we import a lot more. Our customers, the 10 million people living in Michigan, really want a lot of stuff compared to perhaps what we export, and that is a country phenomenon, but perhaps in Michigan it's even more pronounced than in the country. So we got to figure out a way to take our 14,000 companies that sold international last year, perhaps up the number of companies, help them a little bit more in Michigan, but also the companies that are selling, help them sell more. If we take all of this data into sort of a ratio analysis, we can talk about global efficiency, and that's what I titled this talk as well. So global efficiency go up and down, steady state upward sloping trend. except for in the last few years. From 2011, the world started being less efficient, but we actually didn't notice that much because the world was doing pretty well on so many different measures. In 2016, though, these inefficiencies became more costly for the world. So we were kind of in a lull between 2011 and 2016. But 2016, these less globally efficient parts of the world became noticeable for the globe in terms of the products and services. And that has implications. The first question is, of course, how tariff-proof are Michigan companies, their global supply chains? Can we source from different parts of the world? Can we dynamically change what we do? The answer is usually that we have set up these supply chains literally over decades in some cases, certainly for the auto industry that I mentioned. And it's not super easy to actually change that and still stay effective and efficient. Michigan companies then can strategically plan for downturns, I think, but there's a big but in here. It is harder to strategically plan for what I call the bullwhip effects in supply chains. When trade is expected to increase, but global efficiency is expected to decrease. So we have a trifecta here of cost from 2016 and on seems to be more noticeable and increasing around the world. Global efficiency is going down. Meanwhile, customers expect us to trade more across borders because they want what they need and want around the world. So we'll see international trade go up, global efficiency go down, and cost go up. And that's a really hard nut to crack for Michigan companies to get through all those basically lower margins. Big time lower margins is what we're going to see an effect for the manufacturing companies in particular that come from Michigan and sell their products. And that's a little bit of a trouble as an outlook, because if you look at the top 10 exporting industries, or exporting countries rather, related to Michigan, top 10 import countries coming into Michigan, or products from those countries coming into Michigan, all 20 of these countries, there are many that overlap on both charts, but all 20 of these line items have been in the news for, when we talk about the White House, perhaps trade war and tariffs and renegotiations and squabbles that we have with these countries. So all of these countries are in play, that we're still trying to figure out what they mean for Michigan and the country as a whole. And that's interesting, of course, when costs going up, global efficiency is going down, trade is expected to continue to go up because the customers demand it. Michigan in particular is running into a set of countries from an exporting standpoint and an importing standpoint, where we're going to have to deal with some of those renegotiated agreements and perhaps no agreements at all. Meanwhile, we're of course in a trade imbalance, 49th out of the 50 states that exist in the United States. That's a little bit spiel of global efficiency and explaining today's international trade environment.